Appalachia. Everybody in the world has a reaction to that word. It makes folks think everything from beautiful mountaintop views, dangerous hillbillies running through the woods with a rifle in one hand and a jug of shine in the other, all the way to trailer parks, drugs, and blame near everything in between. The Appalachian Mountains are the oldest mountains in the world. They once towered 30,000 feet into the air. They stretch along the eastern U.S. from Canada through 14 states all the way to Louisiana. The folks that live in these mountains have seen and endured enough things to have happened to make a preacher cuss. Hello, I'm Larry Bentley, and I was born and raised in the Appalachian Mountains of Southwest Virginia, and I was raised there by folks who lived for generations right there in the heart of them old mountains. Come with me and we'll take a look at some of the odd, awful, or legendary things that happen within my beloved mountains, and we'll be traveling along just a bit outside the area, looking through the eyes of an old Appalachian at some of the crazy that spread itself around outside the area as well. Welcome to Season 6 of Appalachian Murder, Mystery, and Legend. Hi, my good friends. I hope you're doing well today. Thank you so much for stopping by, and welcome back. Today we're dragging a particularly nasty story up out of the woodwork of Mason County, West Virginia. Now you're fixing to hear a tale that's got more darkness in it than a coal mine on a new moon night. I remember this one making the news because it's one that hangs with you and leaves a stain on you that you just can't get off. Sometimes a thing is just so wicked and flat out wrong, it just busts right up out of the ground like Night of the Living Dead and walks around getting into everything around it. That's what happened in 1976. The air was cold enough to freeze the whiskers off a hound dog in Point Pleasant, West Virginia. Now, no, this ain't about that flying terror you see in them parts, although we're going to probably talk about him one of these days. What happened there was a worse terror than that. This is about people, real human evil, and right when you think you can't get no worse, well, it does. So come on in, take your shoes off, and set a spell while I tell you about this powder keg of a mess. Now, before we get to the horror I'm fixing to tell you about, let me tell you a little bit about Mason County. It ain't just any old patch of dirt. It sits right there where the Canal River shakes hands with the Ohio River. It's a place built on industry and, of course, tragedy. Only 9 years before our story starts, back in 1967, the Silver Bridge collapsed right there in Point Pleasant, dropping 46 folks into that icy Ohio River. Even in 1976, the town was still reeling from that. After that, there were people who looked up and wouldn't have been surprised to see the sky start falling. Now, when you live in a place that's seen that much sudden death, it changes the way you look at things. It makes the air feel heavy, like it's made out of a damp wool about half the time. Now, the Sisk family didn't live in the actual town. They lived up a holler piece in a trailer that was, I guess you'd call it more of a tin can than a home. In the winter of 1976, the unemployment rate in West Virginia was climbing like a kitten up a set of mama's drapes. People were desperate, and desperation in a mountain holler usually leads to one of two things, the jug or the Bible. Now, for the Sisks, it seemed to be a little more jug and a whole lot less Bible, and something a whole lot darker that had already slid in for a stay and wasn't planning on leaving without wreaking a little havoc. Just past midnight on February 28th, the phone lit up at the sheriff's office. It was an 18-year-old girl named Harriet Sisk, and she was on the line, screaming and crying like somebody just broke some real bad news to her. Well, there might not have been anybody breaking it, but the news wasn't good. Her 2-month-old daughter, little Davy, was gone, just vaporized into thin air. Now, that trailer was a single wide, sitting on cinder blocks that probably shifted every time a wind blew or the back door rattled every time the front door was open. In a place that little, you can hear a mouse fart in the kitchen from the back bedroom. For a baby to vanish while 2 parents and a half-brother are inside there, well, that's a story that didn't hold water from the get-go. The search parties went out, and let me tell you about a 1976 West Virginia search. It ain't like the movies where they got floodlights and helicopters. It's a team of men in flannel coats with ever-ready flashlights that start dimming the minute the cold hit the battery. Now, the terrain around the holler was a nightmare of shale and scrub pine. In February, the ground is heaving like it's breathing. It's first freezing and then thawing, which makes it soft in some spots and hard as a coffin lid in others. Now, the searchers weren't just looking for a baby, they were looking for a disturbance in that layer of pine needles and dead leaves that mounts up on the ground in the woods like a fine shag carpet. Now, when they found that patch of freshly turned dirt, the volunteer that saw it, a neighbor who'd known the Sisk his whole life, well, they say he just fell to his knees before he even started digging. It's like he knew what was coming. We all know that the mountains sometimes have a way of telling you the truth before you see it with your own eyes, don't we? Now, and sure enough, they dug down, mostly with their hands, and they just found little Davy. She was wrapped in her blanket, and there was that rag doll. It wasn't no store-bought thing. It was a handmade. Sad to say that it was probably the only thing that baby ever got out of life. Whoever put it there thought they were being merciful, I reckon. But when the coroner, Dr. Joseph Showalter, same man, mind you, that seen all the worst of the Silver Bridge disaster, looked at that baby, he didn't see no mercy. He saw a 2-month-old human being who'd been beaten until her ribs were broke and, broke up like dry kindling and then choked until her lights went out. The Sheriff Elvin Pete Wedge was a man's man. He'd been in the Navy and seen the world, but he hadn't never seen nothing like this, let alone in his own backyard. Now, this part, I was told so by somebody who ought to know. I was told that the sheriff pounced on and arrested Larry Sisk, the half-brother, and then gave him a free ride downtown because Larry'd confessed. Larry was what they called a mite slow, that kind of a fella that would agree with you just to keep a conversation going. Larry's confession was a rambling, nonsensical mess. He claimed that he did it because the baby wouldn't stop crying, but he couldn't remember where he got the shovel or how he'd managed to do it all without Harriet and Bruce hearing a thing. Now, the town was screaming for blood, so they went ahead and threw Larry in the cage and figured the job was probably done. But once again, we see the truth has a way of rising to the top like cream on top of a milk pail. Now, Harriet Sisk couldn't live with the lie, or maybe she couldn't live with the thought of Larry taking the fall while she and her husband Bruce stayed out of jail. So she confessed. She was the one who beat the baby. She was the one who throttled her. So they went ahead and locked her up in the Mason County Courthouse jail. And from what I understand, let Larry go on his way. Now, the courthouse building was built back in 1854. It was a fortress of stone and brick. Now, the jail was in the basement, and it had them thick walls and narrow windows with a feeling of being buried alive even before the judge said a word to you. Now, Bruce Sisk had worked for a construction crew out near Gallipolis, and he, let's just say liberated a couple of cases of high-velocity blasting gelatin before he left. He'd been sitting on that powder keg like a mother hen on a bad egg. On March 2nd, Bruce didn't come to the courthouse to break his wife out. He came to break as much as he could. He walked in with a suitcase that witnesses said he carried like a sleeping baby, and a sawed-off shotgun tucked under his coat. When he got to the basement, he held the jailer, Charles Anson, at gunpoint. He didn't want money. He didn't want a car. He just wanted to into Harriet's cell, saying that he just wanted to be with his wife. Mr. Anson immediately slammed the door and locked it once he got inside. Then he ran upstairs to get some backup. Sheriff Pete Wedge didn't hesitate. He walked down into that basement to talk to Bruce. He talked Bruce down from what he was thinking. Now, he thought maybe he could use it, them sheriff voices that they have, the one that usually settles bar fights and domestic disputes, but you can't talk to a man who's already decided he's a ghost. At one point, he did get Bruce to let Harriet's cellmate, Alex Sue Missing, out. He gave her a message for the sheriff. He told the sheriff she told the sheriff that Bruce told her that the building better get evacuated, and it better be pretty blamed quick. They got near everybody out before Bruce dropped the hammer and set off his suitcase. Let me tell you, it weren't no pop like a firecracker. It was 30 sticks of dynamite worth of explosive in a confined stone basement. Now, the physics of that just plain are terrifying. The blast wave didn't just move air, it turned stones in the courthouse into shrapnel. Now, the explosion was heard as far away as Hogsett, near about 15 miles down the river. People in Point Pleasant thought a gas main done let go, while ones that didn't think that they were, or didn't even think about anything else, they were still being haunted by the Silver Bridge, so, they thought maybe the bridge had done fell again. When the smoke cleared, the place looked like a war zone. The county clerk's office, located right above the jail, had its floor completely vaporized. Records dating back to the 1800s, all the birth certificates and death certificates, marriage records, and property deeds were fluttering down like black snow all over the streets of Point Pleasant. Now, because there weren't no computers used back in that day and any time yet, the blast turned all them valuable documents into burnt confetti, and for years afterwards, folks in Mason County had a hard time proving who they were, or who they were hitched to, or who owned what farm, or where any of the property lines were. Bruce didn't just kill everybody in jail, he erased the history of the county in the process. The death toll was a heavy burden for a small town to carry. Bruce and Harriet, of course, were blown to stains on the shrapnel wall. There wasn't enough left of them to clean up with a pencil eraser. Deputy Kenneth Love was a young man well liked by the whole county and was gone in a flash. Sheriff Pete Wedge, well, he lingered for a day with his body broke up by the pressure wave before he joined his ancestors. And jailer Charles Anson, well, he fought for a week, but the injuries were just too much for him. The funeral for Sheriff Wedge was the biggest one the county had ever seen. There were over 300 police cars in the procession, stretching for miles. It was a sea of blue and red, the whole county trying to stand tall when their foundation had been literally blown to bits right out from under them. Larry Sisk, the man who'd originally confessed and was released from his murder charge, was free, but his life was pretty much ruined. Now, he lived out his days like some kind of hermit who'd been a pawn in a game played by monster. He died in a state facility after being shunned and then forgot about by most folks around the area. Today, the Mason County Courthouse is a modern square building. It's functional, it's clean, but if you talk to the old-timers that work there, they'll tell you that the basement still feels tight, and that sometimes when the wind blows off that old Ohio River and the fog rolls in, you can hear the sound of somebody setting a suitcase down on a stone floor. The Sisks had one of them self-annihilation packs, and they wanted to go out in a blaze of glory because they couldn't face the music after what they did to little Davy. They got their wish, but being the selfish little horses' asses they were, they took some good people with them. That's the thing about evil. It ain't a sniper, it's a grenade. It don't care who it hits as long as it makes and leaves the biggest, ugliest mess possible. Some of the locals say little Davy's still out there, tucked into that stand of scrub pine, waiting for the day when a family means protection instead of a powder keg. We have ghosts in the Appalachians because these old mountains remember names and remember a blast, and they remember the cost of a broken heart and a suitcase full of thunder. Hope you got something out of our story today. If you did, please rate and review the podcast, and don't forget to subscribe or follow wherever you're watching on YouTube, Rumble, Spotify, or maybe throw us a like if you are too. And come on over to Appalachian Murder, Mystery, and Legend Podcast group on Facebook, where we talk Appalachian or about anything else you want to talk about. I'll be back real soon with another Appalachian Murder, Mystery, or Legend, and I will see you then.